Okay, so that is 11:30. So we'll go ahead and get started. We've got 20 of you on the call today, 21 now. So I appreciate you taking the time this morning to join me. There were 135 people registered for today, so that's fantastic. Shows that there is real interest in understanding fields and markers. But I think it's really useful that we are going to make these recordings available for people who are not available at this time of day. So I do appreciate you guys joining me. I hope that these webinars last 25 minutes to half an hour. They are designed to be sort of bite-sized chunks of valuable information that you can use within your club to make the way you run your club maybe that little bit more efficient or have a bit more information stored within the system. So what I want to go through today is I want to go through what are fields and markers. A lot of you will already be using fields and markers, but there will be a lot of clubs who are sort of saying, what are they? I don't understand. Maybe, how can I use them? So I'm going to go through what they are. Then I'm going to go through how to set up your own fields and markers, because that is the key to fields and markers is they are custom. And then we're going to go through what can fields and markers actually be used for. I'm going to give a few examples which are very, very common. And then I'm going to give a couple of examples which maybe aren't as common as the others, but are still really, really useful ways to use your Club V1 system. And then at the end, if anyone has any questions, there will be a question and answer session. So like I say, I don't really expect this to last more than half an hour. And I do appreciate you giving up your time this morning to join me. Okay, so let's get started. So what are fields and markers? So as standard, Club V1 can store limited information, okay? So, we can store forenames, surnames, dates of birth, addresses, parental emails, all that different kind of stuff as standard. We regularly get asked by clubs, I need to store this bit of information for my members, but I can't store it in Club V1. But the answer is that actually you can. Through fields and markers, you can store any information that you wish to store. Okay, so that can be anything from car registration numbers through to occupations of members and things like that. Okay, so you can store anything that you want. A field is a text or numerical bit of information. So there are text fields and there's numerical fields. And then we have markers, which is a simple yes, no option, okay? And they can be turned on or off. When you set up a field, they become instantly searchable. So you can then search for that wording, you can search for that number, or you can search for who has a marker turned on, okay? And then all fields and markers become reportable instantly, okay? So let's go in now and have a look at how to set up your fields and markers. We will then come back to how they can be used in real life, okay? So we're going to look at how to set one up. To do that, you go into Club, Settings, Fields and Markers. So let's do that now. Okay, so that's going to open my Club V1. I'm going to go in Club. I'm going to go in Settings. And I'm going to drop down from Club Details to Fields and Markers here. Okay, so click on that. And then what we can see in here is that I have various fields and markers set up already. Okay, now one of the more less common things that we have in the system is maybe that clubs want to store the car registration numbers of their members, so that if there's a bump in the car park, a member comes in and says, I've just bumped into this car. You can get the registration number, you can search the registration number, and you can see if that belongs to one of your members, and if it does, who does it belong to? So if we add in car registration number, we're going to add custom field here. And we're going to put in the description, car registration number, okay? And that is going to be a text field. The drop downs we have here are text, number, marker, which is the yes or no, a date, or a currency. So, for example, people use dates if they want to store leaving dates, for example, when a member's left a club. And currency, let's say that you are doing a loan scheme at the golf club, you can store that currency within the currency field. So our car registration number is going to be a text field. I then click save on that, and that is now active. I can now search for myself, go into my account, go to edit on my profile, drop down from profile to additional info. And then in additional info, I have all of these markers set up here. Okay. Then as we scroll down, we have our numbers and we have our text. So there we have our car registration number, and I can put in AB12 CDE as my registration number. Okay. I then save that, finish that, and that has now stored that in my member record as my car registration number. So another member comes into the office and says, oh, I've just had a bump. The registration I've bumped into is AB12CDE. You can come into your search field here and you can type in AB12CDE. And you can see there that Matthew Berg's car registration number is AB12CDE. Okay, so you can click on there, and now you know that when I come back in off the course, someone has to break the news to me that my car's been bumped into. Okay, so that's just one example of how you can store information and what it might be used for. Obviously, you will know much better than I do what kind of information that might be useful for storing. Okay. What I'm going to go through very quickly now, if I jump back into my slideshow, is what can fields and markers actually be used for. So I'm going to give you some active examples that I've got set up in my system, and then you can decide how, as a club, you want to use them within your club. Okay. So the first one, fields and markers, can be used for searching. So as we've just looked at for the car registration number, you might have your member's occupation stored. So your club needs a plumber or an electrician or whatever you may need, a solicitor or whoever you may need. You can go into your Club V1 and you can come up to the search bar here and we can type in plumber. And that tells me that Jonathan Cook is a plumber. Okay, so if we need a plumber within the club, we can pick up the phone to Jonathan and say, explain the situation and ask if he can pop out and have a look at whatever we need. Okay, now you would just go into club settings, fields and markers, and set up a field, a text field, and name it occupation. You can then start storing that kind of information. They are also used for if your club is lucky enough to have a proposer and seconder maybe. Club V1 can't store that information as standard. However, using fields and markers, you can absolutely store the proposer and seconder of a particular member. Okay, so that's a relatively common way that the system's used to store occupation or to store proposer and seconder. One of the most common, and I think probably one of the best ways of using fields and markers, is for locker numbers. So again, as standard, Club V1 can't really store locker numbers. We haven't got anywhere to store that. But what you can set up within your system is a field for the actual locker number. And then what I recommend to clubs is they set up a marker based on the size of that locker. So you might have a shoe bag locker, you might have a hold all locker, you might have a full golf club, golf bag size locker. You may even have sort of trolley stores and things like that as well. So the best way to do it is to have one field for locker number and then have markers for locker type. So if I jump into my Club V1 again, and I go into my profile here, I go to edit, and I go to additional info. Down at the bottom here, I've got my large locker there and I've got my small locker there. Okay, so that's all I have at my club. I've got a large locker or a small locker. Okay, I then have here locker number 1 because some of my members may have more than one locker. So I could have locker number 1 and locker number 2. I also have trolley store down here as well. So in there, I've put my locker numbers and I've said whether that's a large locker or a small locker. Okay, and the reason that is important, rather than just having the locker number in there so you can pull off a list, is we can actually turn charges off based on those small or large lockers. But we're going to come to that a little bit later, okay? But what we can now do is I can come into reports and lists, and I can add a list, and I can put in here locker numbers, and then I can remove all the column headers if I want, use short column headers, display totals. We don't need to do any of that. We might want 2 columns on a page. We might want to shade alternate rows. Continue through there. I don't particularly like using title, forename, surname. My preference is for surname, title, forename. Okay, so that has now put that in. I can then add in my locker number. So I scroll down and locker number 1 is a field, locker number 2 is a field, and then I can now report on who has what locker, okay? But I'm going to sort this by people who have a locker number. So I'm going to have it in locker number order, okay? And then I'm only going to filter this by add field, locker number, and add. And I just want to know people who actually have a locker, okay? So this is only going to give me a report of the number of lockers we've got. So I've got 11 lockers that are assigned to members at the moment. And this report will tell me who has what locker, okay? So I can then print that, and I can see here, based on locker number, that Alex Berg has locker 1, Jack Berg has locker 2, Carl Berg locker 3, etc., etc., etc. So in theory, I can now see here that locker 4 is free. Okay, so do we have locker 4 that we can now assign to a different member? Okay, so it's useful for that kind of information. Okay, so that's how these fields and markers become reportable as well. Okay. Fields and markers can be used for filtering. So do you need a list of all your past captains, for example? If we go into our directory, we can filter, add a field, and if we have past captain, I'm not sure if I have past captain or just captain. I have captain here. So this is anyone who has been marked with the captain marker, okay? And that gives me 3 people. So it's not necessarily our current captain, but it's anyone who falls under the captain and past captains category. Okay, so I can go into my profile here. Again, all of this information is stored in additional information. So we have captain here, and Matt is assigned to being a captain. If we wanted to put the year that this person was captain, we could add a field for that. Okay. If we wanted to add this year's captain in, we might say that we'll go back to Jonathan Cook. Jonathan Cook is captain this year. So we go into his record, we go to additional info, and we say that he is captain there. Okay. So as you can see on here, I've got various different markers set up. So I've got my monthly markers, and we'll come to that in a second. I've got my away day. We'll come to that in a second. Then I've got things like captain, committee members, if they pay by direct debit, if they're ex-committee members, lady captains, and then my lockers, as we've discussed. We've got that loan amount, the locker number 1 and 2, the trolley store. Then we've got car registration number, occupation and proposer. These are by no means an exhaustive list of what you can use, but they are just some examples that we see on a fairly regular basis. Okay. So that was looking at filtering through the directory. We can also filter on reports. We can filter on emails as well. So this brings us nicely on to the next one. Do you need to email all of your members who have registered an interest in the Captain's Away Day? So as we saw in Jonathan's profile there, when I go to additional info, I have a marker here for Away Day 2025. And Jonathan has actually registered his interest for that. So we can set up a marker for Away Day 2025. Whenever anyone tells us that they're interested in attending that, we can come into their profile, mark them as a yes. What then that allows us to do is we go into communications, we go to mailing, we add a mailing, we put in subject of Captain's Away Day 2025. We put who this is going to, who the reply is going to, sorry. And then we say, dear forenames, and that will say, dear Jonathan, you have expressed an interest in the Captain's Away Day this year. The details are as follows, blah, 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 blah. Captain, payment needs to be made, whatever those details are, etc., etc. Okay, so we now set up that email. We then click continue through here. We can add any attachments we need to add. And then in here now, we can now add a field, and Captain's Away Day is Away Day there is a marker. Add that in. We only want the people who have said yes. We click apply. And that brings up, in this case at the moment, the 4 people who have expressed an interest in that away day. We can now send that email simply to those 4 people. Okay, so hopefully you can see how that's used as well. You will, I'm sure, be used to using fields and markers in your emails. So all of those different markers and fields that we've used can be used as filters for emails as well. Okay, and then the final one that I want to look at here today is fields and markers being used for billing. Now, this is a really, really important part of the system that a lot of clubs simply don't use. So within the Club V1, you can bill your members if they have a locker. Okay, so you have a locker charge. What a lot of clubs still do is they will go through manually and make sure that anyone who has a locker on a spreadsheet or on a written piece of paper is being charged for their locker. The best way of doing this is to ensure that you have that information updated consistently through the year. So what that then allows us to do is when we come into finance and bills, we can then go to set up our bills, and we can set in bill charge items our global charges. What I recommend to clubs every year when you do your subs run is come in here, turn your large lockers off, turn your small lockers off, turn your trolley stores off, and anything else that you need to turn off, turn them off. Continue through there, and we're going to turn these off for everyone, okay? So what this will mean is that once we do this, none of our members have a locker charge or a trolley store charge assigned to their name. So if I go into my account, go to finance, go to bills and payments, we can see here that I do not have a locker charge on my bill at the moment. Okay. What we then do is go back into finance, back into bill charge items and standard charges. And we go to global charges, and now we have to turn these on one by one, okay? So we go large locker, category default, which means that we're going to get charged the amount that our category should be charged for a large locker. Continue through there, and now what we want to do is add field of large locker, and we only want people who are set to yes, and we can apply that, of which there are 7. But then just to double check on that, we add field and we go to locker number 1 and add that in. And anyone who has a locker number between 1 and 999. Okay, we then apply that, and that tells me that those 7 people still have a locker. So it might have been that Richard Berg here had given his locker back, and we've taken the locker number out of his account, but we've forgotten to unmark the marker. So Richard may still have come up in a large locker, but he didn't actually have a locker number anymore. So that's why I always encourage you to use both fields when doing this. Okay. So what we're now doing is turning the large locker charge on for anyone who has a large locker with a number between 100 and 990, 1 and 999. Click continue through there and confirm. So what that's now done is turn those charges on for those 7 people. So if I go back into my account here, we can then see that I have my large locker charge turned on there. Okay, we would then go back in and do it for our small lockers, and we'd do global charges, small locker, category default, continue, and then we change that to small locker and add and apply, and I've got 4 members who have a small locker. So I continue through there and turn that charge on for those 4 people. Okay, so you can see how that works. The other interesting way of using fields and markers is if you have a rolling membership. Now, this is starting to become a bit more popular within golf clubs, where members join in March and their subscriptions renew in March. Lots of clubs say to us, oh, we'd love to do a rolling membership, but your system can't do it. Well, actually, we can. And the way that we do that is, as I have set up here, if I go back into my profile, and I go into my profile here and into additional info, what we'll see is that I have a marker set up for January, February, March, April, May, and so on. Now, I, as a member at the moment, haven't got any of those ticked. Okay, so if I click that I joined in April, what we can then do, continue through there and finish that. So that has now assigned me as an April payer. So then when we come to do our bill run, I can say that I just want to do it. We'll pretend that we're in April now. Add a field of April, just the people who have April marked as yes, apply, and that is just me. Okay, so I would only be raising these bills for people whose subscription renews in April. So we could do a bill run every single month for the right people. Okay, so that is something that has become a bit more common recently, and this is the way that clubs are doing it. That might be something that you've considered doing at your club, but you haven't thought there's a way of doing it. There absolutely is a way of doing it, and you can use fields and markers to suit what you want to use. Okay, and as I mentioned, I expected today to last sort of 25 minutes, half an hour. We've been 23 minutes so far. And all that's left for me to do really is take any questions that you may have, and I can try and answer them live on the screen for you now.